Hello fellow cyborgs, and welcome to a Victober video, like the only one I recorded all month because I've been too busy reading and being lazy. I want to talk to you about the 4 Victorian classics I want to reread sometime soon. I read Dombey and Son a couple of years ago. I primarily listened to the audiobook. In fact, I think I completely listened to the audiobook even though I had a physical copy. I absolutely loved the narration by David Timson. It was such a completely enjoyable audiobook experience. However, I find that though I tend to enjoy classics more when I'm listening to them on audiobook, I don't look at them as analytically as I like to as when I'm physically reading it. Since I've only absorbed the story of Dombey and Son auditorially, I would like to physically read it in the new year and hopefully pick up on more of the nuances and enjoy the details of the story a little bit better. Another Dickens, a big chunky Dickens that I listened to on audiobook first, this is Bleak House. I listened to the audiobook narrated by Simon Vance, and I found that that was an incredibly engaging listening experience, and I also flew through Bleak House. I read it in like a week. It definitely helped that I had Katie from Books and Things videos on Bleak House to listen to as well every 3 or 4 chapters or so. It was a great motivator. The first 100 pages or so I read physically, and then I switched to the audiobook because I hadn't picked it up in like a year, and the audiobook helped me finish it. I didn't love the first 100 pages, but the developments throughout the rest of the book were so amazing and fun and interesting that I would really like to reread Bleak House and take my time absorbing the characters and all of those plot developments, and hopefully looking at the first 100 pages I didn't love with a fonder eye, knowing where it's going and knowing what the mysteries are leading to. Shirley by Charlotte Bronte may be my new favorite classic of all time, but I really couldn't tell you that until I've reread it, which is the primary reason why I want to reread this title. Jane Eyre has been my favorite classic for a long time, and I was hoping Villette would actually be my favorite classic over Jane Eyre, but that's just not meant to be. But I'm thinking that Charlotte Bronte may still hold that title, but in Shirley instead. I'm really looking forward to getting back into this work, even though it feels like I just read it. I probably won't pick this up like immediately, but within the next like calendar year, I would like to reread Shirley and see if it still holds up. And the last Victorian classic I hope still holds up is Wives and Daughters. I buddy read this with Sarai from Sarai Talks Books a few years ago, and our buddy reading experience was so much fun. We had a blast summarizing what each chapter had involved and then speculating on what was to come. I remember being as invested in all of the characters in the novel as with Molly, who you could argue is the main character. I really liked how this was more a snapshot of a town rather than about one specific person. I'm curious to see if I will love this as much on the second read as the first. I really hope that I do. I do have some bonus other classics that I can't call Victorian that I would like to reread sometime soon, so let me show you them. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is not Victorian by a couple dozen years or so, but this was written in the early 1800s, so it's technically like a Regency work. I first read Frankenstein a few years ago and remembered being underwhelmed. I didn't really know what to expect of the original text, and I found that some parts were overwritten. I'm thinking that maybe those were the bits that Percy Shelley edited, but I have no evidence. I just want to believe that. I'm hoping that I can appreciate this more fully for what it does as a interesting text written by a woman, and also what it does as like proto-horror or proto-science fiction when I reread it. I have an interesting relationship with The Awakening by Kate Chopin. I was taking a humanities course in community college and remembered hearing her name when I was at Borders, when Borders was still a chain bookstore in America. Rest in peace. I picked up this book from the shelf and kind of smiled at it and was like, oh, I recognize the fancy person's name. Put it back on the shelf, and then 5 of them fell on me. So I bought one. Then I read it and was confused and didn't love it and gave my copy away, and then later decided I wanted to revisit the text and bought the same edition. When I reread it a second time, I think I got more out of it, but recognized that this is a work that I feel like is kind of like Wuthering Heights, where I don't think I'll ever love it, but I think every time I reread it, I will appreciate it more for different reasons. So I'm hoping that my third reading experience of The Awakening is even more enjoyable than the first two. I'm also looking forward to rereading reading the short stories, I have zero recollection of them. And finally, the light has changed, and I would like to reread The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. This edition, which is a Borders edition, again, rest in peace, has no translator, which kind of makes me nervous now, but oh well. It tells me who illustrated the illustrations, but not who translated the work, which is upsetting. This was one of the classics that I picked up after graduating high school voluntarily, and I remember feeling very smug and proud of myself that I was reading a classic and enjoying it, but also mostly like understanding it. I remember this being a fun romp, and I remember a lot of the events pretty clearly, and I have some like snapshot images that I took from when I was reading this text, but I haven't read it in like 10 or 12 years, so I would like to do that. So those are some classics that are at the top of my rereading list. Please let me know in the comments down below if there are any classics that you're itching to reread and why. I would love to be nosy and know. Thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely.